May the 8th has come and gone, and fewer people took part in our elections. This year, 66% of those who registered actually showed up, the lowest since the dawn of democracy. Pundits have been explaining and troubleshooting the scenarios, and the critics of non-voters yell, well, you didn't vote, so you don't get to criticize. Famed comedian George Carlin explained why he didn't vote, saying, now some people like to say, if you don't vote, you have no right to complain. Where's the logic in that? If you vote and you elect dishonest, incompetent politicians and they get into office and screw everything up, you are responsible for what they've done. You voted them in, you caused the problem, so you have no right to complain. On Madam Speaker, we ask, is voting the only way to have a say in our country? And if you choose not to vote, must you shut up? My panel, TK Pue, is a political analyst from NWU and visiting lecturer at the Thabo Mbeki African Leadership Institute, joined by IEC Commissioner Mosotho Moepia. Professor Eva Gumede is an analyst and journalism lecturer, forms part of our jury. Kaya Sithole, who's an economic and political analyst, and Koketso Moeti, the executive director of Amandla.mobi. Let's get straight in, and thank you so much to all of my guests. You know the rules, got to keep it short and sharp as possible so that we can deal with as many of the issues as we can. So here's the backdrop. Of those who actually registered, 17.6 million made it their mission to make their mark. 9 million did not, and we're talking just about those who registered. If you didn't vote, TK, are you a bad person?
I don't think it's a good or bad on your morals, but I think as a citizen it raises a different question to say, look, I used to live in Australia, and Australia it's mandatory to vote. So I tend to fall on the Australian side, which is to say, well, look, if you haven't voted, then what are you complaining about? It's not so much that you elect dishonest or honest people. It's an issue of saying you have basically said you haven't put any skin in the game, regardless of whether you think the candidates are worthy or not.
But just on the subject of mandatory voting, I mean, doesn't that take away from democracy, which says it is your right to choose?
I think sometimes South Africa is punch drunk with rights, and we're not very good on...
Can you ever be punch drunk
You
on
can.
rights?
Oh, South Africa is a classic example of punch drunk with rights.
I would say the more rights, the better.
No. Sometimes it becomes an issue where we're a developing country, and look, if you look at our circumstance, you actually cannot afford to just be a basic bystander. You look at the way our local government is structured, I think you do...
All right. So on the point of basic bystander, and maybe, Mosotho, I can bring you in here. The reality is the numbers are telling us people are not caring, they're not smarking this too much, because our voter turnout of those who registered is actually the lowest since we made our transition into democracy. What is it telling you?
I think it tells a few stories. One is that people are taking their rights seriously, as TK says, including the right not to participate. Which I must say, it's not one that I think it's an easy one that we've got to encourage one to take, especially as a young democracy. There are so many things that still need to be done in this country. There are so many voices that must still be heard, and I think people must participate. But it also tells us that, democracy is maturing in South Africa, and it's maturing very fast.
That sounds slightly oxymoronic to me. If it's maturing, it means that more people feel invested, more people want to take part and be a part of things. But what I'm reading into this is that people are saying, here's a game, here's a paradigm that has been designed for us, and we must just fit in. What if we don't like the paradigm?
No, that's why I think I'd agree with people to say, listen, maybe it's not so much that people are apolitical, which is a different thing altogether. It could just be people don't like the candidates, which raises the question of, and I think maybe this is a better question to ask, is why aren't people involved in actual political structures? Because my basic argument for saying mandatory is to say it even means, look, you might not like the ANC or the EFF, but at least go to the branch and belong to something. Because I think if you're saying you don't like the players in the game, then put yourself in the game.
But you still need, you need people to feel involved. You need people to feel invested. Time and time again, based on not only the numbers, but based on the number of scandals that we have, where people feel so disconnected from having, a real meaning to their voice, that they're saying, then what's the point of it? How do you turn that mindset around, and what are some of the alternatives we can play with?
Well, voter education or democracy education in general, it's a big thing. It's something that I clearly accept, and I acknowledge that it's not a game for us in the Electoral Commission alone. It has to be something that is taught in schools. It has to be something that is practiced in societies. It's got to be something that is made fairly big for everyone to participate in. And I think in that way, we encourage people to participate.
Well, let's interrogate that. I mean, is voter education more important than saying, look, when I participate, this is how material change actually happens, where the country advances or creates a situation where more people can advance, and we're seeing regression in terms of our growth, in terms of our economics, in terms of people's expectations.
And that's why I say, for me, that's why the mandatory thing needs to come up, which is to say, at the moment, for you to simply stay away, you're not actually harming anyone at the end but yourself, because you look at how numbers tend to work out. Whether you like or dislike the party, they will benefit whether you especially if you're not there. So my argument for having mandatory simply says, listen, at least, even if you get there on the day and you say, listen, I'm going to spoil I have no issue with that. But the point is to at least be in the game, because this way...
But what if the game sucks? And we have been at this as a society. I know my jury is dying to get in, and they'll get in just now. We've been at this for many, many decades. Can we come up with something new?
I must tell you, and it sounds strange, but a few years ago, we were approached by civil society organizations that said to us, if you're serious about democracy, one of the options you've got to put on the ballot is none of the above. So the question you ask is, who is that candidate who's none of the above, and what happens when they win an election?
Yes, so we don't entertain that, do we?
We didn't. Of course, we don't have that.
Instead of writing indecipherable expletives on a ballot sheet, maybe that should be the option for us too. We'll talk about referendums in just a second, because they might be a timeless and important tool that we can use to have some kind of immediacy in the way that citizens talk back. So our jury weighs in. You're watching Madam Speaker.